All right, so we're driving deep today into that pesky TE error code you might be seeing on your LG WM2487's HRM washer.
Oh, yeah, that one can be a real head scratcher.
It can, but that's why we're here.
Right.
To break it down and figure out if it's even worth fixing on a machine, this, shall we say, vintage?
Vintage is a nice way to put it.
Hey, we're going to be optimistic here.
Wait,
And to help us out, we've got some great intel from the Repair Talk Q&A podcast.
that's a good one.
It is. They had an expert on Banks from Fantastic Repairs, and they really got into the nitty-gritty of this specific washer and this error code.
You know, it's amazing this model is still around.
Right. This thing came out in 2007.
In today's world, that's like ancient history for appliances.
Seriously, so that begs the question, repair or replace? Is it like restoring a classic car instead of buying new? What do you think?
It's a good question. But first, we got to figure out what this TE code is even telling us.
Yeah, let's decode it. What's the problem here?
Well, the TE code means there's an issue with the thermistor.
Thermi what now?
The thermistor. It's basically the washer's internal thermometer.
Oh.
Yeah, it's a little sensor that keeps track of the water temperature during the cycle.
Makes sense.
But if the thermistor isn't working right, the washer's control board is basically flying blind. It doesn't know how hot or cold the water is, and it won't run properly.
So it's like the washer's brain not getting the memo about the water temperature.
Exactly. And without that info, everything goes haywire.
But before we go blaming the thermistor, could it be something else? Like, what about the wiring?
You're thinking like a pro already. You're right, it might not be a faulty sensor. The problem could be in the wiring that connects the thermistor to the control board.
So how do we figure out who the real culprit is?
If you're feeling up to it, you can do some DIY detective work with a multimeter.
A multimeter. Isn't that for, like, electricians and stuff?
Well, yeah, but they're not that complicated to use. It basically lets you measure electrical currents and check for continuity in a circuit.
So we're checking to see if the thermistor signal is coming through loud and clear.
Precisely. We want to see if the electrical current can flow through the thermistor without any interruptions.
So it's like taking its pulse, making sure its heart is beating.
That's a great analogy. And if the multimeter shows continuity, it means the sensor itself is probably okay.
Got it. But what if we get a bad reading? What then?
Well, if there's no continuity, it's a pretty good sign that the thermistor needs to be replaced.
Okay, so that's one scenario. But what if the sensor checks out? Where do we look next?
Then it's time to turn our attention to the wiring harness. That's the bundle of wires that connects the thermistor to the rest of the washer's electrical system.
So we're going in for a closer look at those wires. What are we looking for exactly?
We're on the hunt for anything that could be disrupting that electrical signal. Frayed wires, corrosion, any loose connections, those are all red flags.
Okay, so damaged wires are a bad sign. Is there a trick to spotting these problems?
You know, Banks had a great tip for this. He said to gently flex the wires while you're testing for continuity with the multimeter.
Oh, interesting. Why is that?
Sometimes a break in the wire can be hidden, so flexing it can help reveal those sneaky issues.
Ah, so it's like a little detective trick. Applying a bit of pressure to see where the weak point is.
Exactly. And let's say we do find a damaged wire. What's the next step?
Time to call in a professional?
Well, you could, but this is actually something you might be able to fix yourself.
Really? I'm not sure I'm that handy.
It's not as complicated as you might think. It involves a few basic steps. First, we need to isolate the damaged section of the wire.
Okay, so pinpoint the problem area.
Right. Then, we cut out the bad part and splice in a new piece of wire. It's kind of like mending a broken chain. We're bridging that gap in the wire to restore the electrical connection.
So splicing is like connecting the links of a chain. Okay, I'm starting to see the picture. But is there anything else we need to know about this splicing business?
The most important thing is making sure that connection is properly insulated.
Makes sense. Don't want any stray electricity running around.
Exactly. We'll use something called heat shrink tubing to encase the spliced section. It's like a protective barrier, preventing the wires from rubbing against each other or any metal parts which could cause shorts or even a fire hazard.
Okay, safety first. So we've replaced the damaged section, insulated it. Anything else?
Just make sure to reattach that wiring harness securely, both to the sensor and the drum. We don't want those wires coming loose and starting the whole problem all over again.
Good point. Now let's talk about time. How long would all this take, the average person?
Banks said it usually takes about 1 to 2 hours to repair the wiring for a TE error.
That's not too bad. But still, wouldn't it be faster to just call a repair person?
It might be faster, but it'll definitely be more expensive.
True. So DIY versus professional repair, that's the big question here, right? What's the cost difference?
For a DIY repair, you're looking at less than $30 for all the parts.
Wow, that's way cheaper than I expected.
But if you call a professional, it could be anywhere from $150 to $300.
Ouch, that's a big difference.
It is, so it's really a matter of weighing your options. Do you want to save money and try it yourself, or do you prefer to leave it to the experts?
Tough choice. So is repairing this washer even a good investment?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And to answer that, we need to consider a few things.
Like what? Lay it on me.
Well, how old is your washer? I mean, we know this model has been around for a while, but has yours been giving you any other trouble?
Right. If it's on its last legs, maybe it's time to say goodbye.
Exactly. And we also need to consider your DIY skills. Are you comfortable working with electrical components, or would you rather leave that to the pros?
Good point. Not everyone's cut out for electrical work.
Nope. And there's one more thing to consider: this LG model's reputation.
You mean how they're like the tanks of washing machines?
Exactly. They were built to last, with some pretty impressive features like steam cycles and energy-efficient operation.
It's like they don't make them like they used to, huh?
Yeah, you got it. And that brings us to another important point: the environmental impact. Repairing instead of replacing is a much more sustainable choice.
I like that angle. It's like giving this trusty machine a second life.
Right. It reduces electronic waste and conserves resources. It's a win-win.
Okay, I'm sold on the environmental benefits for sure. But before we get too deep into all that, I heard there's a way to find out exactly when our machines were made, like some kind of secret code.
Oh, yeah. The serial number, which you can find inside the door, holds that information.
Really? So it's like a little time capsule for our washers. That's cool.
It is. And speaking of time capsules, we've covered a lot of ground in this first part of our deep dive.
We have. We've decoded the TE error, figured out the possible causes, and even talked about the pros and cons of DIY versus professional repair.
And don't forget the environmental angle. But there's still more to explore.
That's right. In the next part, we'll dig into some preventative maintenance tips to keep those wires happy and healthy.
And we'll uncover even more expert advice to help you conquer that TE error code. Stay tuned.
Welcome back to our deep dive into the LG WM2487HRM washer and that TE error code.
We're ready to tackle part 2.
You know, it got me thinking, is there something about this model that makes it more prone to wiring issues than a newer washer?
That's a good question, and it kind of touches on a bigger issue in appliance manufacturing these days.
How so?
Well, this LG model is known for its durability, right? But even the toughest machines can wear down over time.
Yeah, especially with all the use they get.
Exactly. Heat, moisture, vibration, all that stuff takes a toll on the wiring.
So it's not a design flaw, it's just the reality of an appliance that's been working hard for years.
Precisely. And while we can't prevent wear and tear completely, there are definitely ways to minimize future problems.
Like what?
Spill the secrets.
Well, the first thing is don't ignore that TE error code.
So no procrastinating on this one.
Nope. Trust me, ignoring it will only make things worse in the long run.
How so?
Faulty wiring puts extra strain on other parts, like the thermistor or even the control board. Oh, so it's like a domino effect. One problem leads to another.
Exactly. And that can lead to much bigger and more expensive repairs down the road.
Okay, I'm getting the picture. So how do we stay ahead of these potential wiring issues?
Preventative maintenance is key.
So even if everything seems fine, we should still be checking things out.
Absolutely. It's like
Yeah.
a regular checkup for your washer.
Makes sense. So how often should we be doing these checkups?
Banks recommended a visual inspection at least once a year.
So just open it up and take a look.
Exactly. And pay close attention to the wiring harness.
So looking for those same red flags we talked about before. Frayed wires, corrosion, loose connections.
You got it. And while you're in there, make sure the wires are secure and not rubbing against anything.
Okay, so basically giving my washer a little TLC to keep it happy.
I like that. A little effort goes a long way.
Speaking of effort, let's talk about the time commitment for this repair. We know DIY is cheaper, but is it also more time-consuming?
Well, banks estimated that it takes about 1 to 2 hours for the average person to do this repair.
But some of us might be a little slower, right?
Of course. It depends on your experience and how easy it is to access the wiring in your model.
Okay, so factor in some extra time for troubleshooting and figuring things out.
Absolutely. Take your time and don't rush it.
So if we're factoring in cost and time, DIY seems like the winner.
It often is, but it's not always that simple. If you're not comfortable with electrical stuff, or if you're just really busy, it might be worth calling a professional.
Yeah, peace of mind is definitely valuable.
It is. But for those who are up for the challenge, there's a real sense of satisfaction that comes with fixing something yourself.
I can imagine. It's like taking back control. Right.
Exactly. And it's good for the environment, too.
Right. We talked about the environmental impact of choosing repair over replacement. Can you remind us why that's so important?
Sure. When we replace appliances too quickly, it adds to the problem of electronic waste.
And that's bad news for the planet.
Definitely. E-waste is full of hazardous materials that can pollute the environment.
It's not just about overflowing landfills.
Right. And manufacturing new appliances uses a lot of energy and resources.
So extending the life of our existing appliances is a big win for sustainability.
Absolutely. It's a more mindful and responsible approach.
Okay, I'm fully on board with the repair and reuse movement. But before we get too carried away, let's talk safety.
Always a good idea.
What are the key things we need to remember when working with electrical appliances?
First and foremost, unplug the washer before doing any repairs.
That seems obvious, but it's easy to forget.
It is, and wear insulated gloves to protect yourself from shocks.
Good tip. Anything else?
Make sure you have plenty of light and a clear workspace. You don't want any accidents.
Right, safety first.
Exactly. And if you ever feel unsure about something, don't hesitate to call a professional.
Great advice. So we've covered preventative maintenance, safety tips, the whole shebang. What else do we need to know to tackle this TE error?
Well, in the final part of our deep dive, we'll explore some specific resources that can help you diagnose and repair that error with confidence.
Sounds good. Looking forward to it. All right, welcome back to the final stretch of our deep dive into the LG WM2487HRM washer and that TE error code.
We've come a long way.
We have. Decoded the error, weighed our options, talked safety, the whole 9 yards.
And now we're ready for the grand finale, the resources.
Yes.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the tools and guidance that can help us actually tackle this repair.
You know, one thing that really stood out to me during all my research was the online DIY community.
What do you mean?
It's incredibly supportive, like a whole network of people who are passionate about fixing things themselves and helping others do the same.
So it's not just about saving money, it's about sharing knowledge and empowering people.
Exactly. And one of the best resources out there is actually from Banks, the expert we mentioned earlier from the Repair Talk Q&A podcast.
Oh yeah, what about them?
They have a YouTube channel with tons of step-by-step video tutorials for all sorts of appliance repairs.
Seriously. Including our TE error on the LG washer.
You bet. It's like having a personal repair guru right there on your screen.
That's awesome. I'm a visual learner, so that would be so helpful.
Yeah, they really break things down into easy-to-follow steps, even showing you how to use a multimeter and all that.
Okay, so we've got our virtual repair guide. What about the actual parts? Where do we find those?
You'll need a few basic things, a multimeter, some replacement wiring, and heat shrink tubing for insulation.
Sounds straightforward enough.
It is. You can pick all that stuff up at most hardware stores or even online retailers like Amazon.
All right, so parts are covered. But what if we get stuck during the repair? Is there a lifeline?
Don't worry, you're not alone. There are tons of online forums and communities dedicated to appliance repair.
So it's like a virtual support group for DIY repair enthusiasts.
Exactly. You can connect with other people who are working on the same problem, ask questions, share tips, and get advice from those who have been there and done that.
I love that. There's something so reassuring about knowing you're not the only one facing this challenge.
Right. It's a great way to tap into a collective pool of knowledge and experience.
Okay, so we've got our resources, our tools, our support system. Anything else we should keep in mind as we head into this repair?
I think the most important thing is to approach this with a combination of patience and curiosity.
Patience, for sure. Things don't always go as planned, especially with electrical stuff.
Right. But remember, every challenge is a learning opportunity. If you hit a snag, don't get discouraged. Take a step back, do some more research, and don't be afraid to ask for help.
Great advice. And even if we end up calling a professional, at least we tried, right?
Absolutely. And you'll have gained valuable knowledge along the way.
You know what? This whole process has really given me a newfound appreciation for appliances.
I know what you mean.
They really are amazing pieces of engineering that we often take for granted.
And this LG WM2487HRM, it's a true testament to quality and durability. This model has been around for over 15 years, and it's still going strong for a lot of people.
It really is impressive. So to everyone out there with this washer and a TE error code on their hands, don't give up hope.
There's a good chance you can fix it yourself with a little knowledge, the right resources, and a bit of that DIY spirit.
And remember, as we've learned today, repairing is not only good for your wallet, it's good for the planet, too.
Exactly. We're reducing waste, conserving resources, and keeping those perfectly good appliances out of landfills.
Well said. So on that note, we'll leave you with this final thought. The next time you do laundry, take a moment to appreciate your washer. It's a pretty incredible machine that helps make our lives a whole lot easier.
And who knows, maybe you'll even feel inspired to tackle a few more DIY projects around the house.
You never know. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, everyone. Happy repairing.